What about with non-use? What method could I use here? Can I use an indirect method to observe what they're consuming or what they're using?
Yeah.
Yeah? What they're using?
You can look at how much people are willing to pay to go to other places if they're not using this one.
Okay, if they're going somewhere, what are they doing? Are they using it though? This is the tricky part. How do you observe somebody not using something? So that's the key. How do you observe somebody not using existence value, but who has existence value?
So for example, we can look at surrogate markets. So for example, if there is a polluted city, we can look at the relative costs of real estate in the polluted region as well as the clean region, and then we can study that, what people put value on cleaner environment.
Okay. Now one thing, that's perfect, because that's what we're going to talk about. It's called hedonic pricing. But you're observing people using one market, they choose to live there versus not choosing to live somewhere, right? And you can compare based on, what did you say? Costs and prices. So costs and prices give us some market information. We don't have a market for things that we don't use, and that's the problem. So we do use the method that you're talking about to estimate some of these things over here, but not here. So it goes back to the question, can you observe what people are not using and tie value to it? No, you can't. So there is only one method, and this is the direct method. Okay? So those are some of the kind of questions that you would have to ask when you come up with your amenity. Are people using it or not using it? Do people value it for what it is and they're not using it, or do they actually go out and consume it in some way? Like even a wildlife photographer has to actually go someplace, buy all the camera equipment, and take pictures. So you can see that they're paying for amenities, they're paying for products that go with that, and they travel somewhere to do it. If you value existence, looking at what's a popular animal today to save? I don't know. Whales. Save the whales. Has anybody donated to saving the whales? If you have, or I'm sure I have, because I get sucked into all that stuff. What's that? The last one was polar bears, right? Okay, so you pay some money for a polar bear. Are you actually going to go out and see your polar bear? No. Or penguins, or any species. Gorillas. You're not going to go out and see them. So you don't travel. We don't see you consuming any kind of photography stuff or hiking stuff or anything to go there. So the only way to get at that value is to say, what are you willing to pay to save whatever species? Okay? So that's the difference. Can we observe people buying fishing gear, hunting gear, any kinds of those things that would help us to estimate the value, or can we not? Okay, one or the other. So
is it the same when you're asked to donate for saving people in Africa?
Yeah. Yeah, I guess you could consider that existence value, and
because I've never seen these people.
Yeah. Yeah, you don't go. They have those programs now where you get a picture of a little kid or something.
It's just the picture.
Yeah. I suppose you could go and meet them, but often people don't. They stay here. And
you can go and meet the whale.
Yeah. I'm a bit biased in that regard. Okay, so the methods for direct are contingent valuation, and for indirect there are several. We could talk about hedonic pricing. And hedonic pricing is looking at the value of attributes. And we use this in the real estate market. So it's sort of semi-market. If you have a market for real estate, which we do, and you want to know the value of a house, say you're going to get an appraisal, we use hedonic pricing. We look at how many bedrooms, how many bathrooms, does it have a new roof, age, distance to schools, distance to railroad tracks, distance to the garbage dump, whatever. And we come up with values for those attributes to determine the estimate of the whole value. So that's one way to do that. Another way is looking at intermediate products. So for example, let's say you're trying to value a fishery. It's a lake up north, and you know people go there to fish, and they spend a lot of money on rods and reels and boats and kind of stuff, but they don't actually have to pay per pound of fish. So it's sort of quasi, you know that they pay for a license, and some people fish more than others, meaning there's greater value for some people. So one thing to do is look at the products that they purchase to help with that activity. You could do the same for hunting. The guns, the boots, those big plastic duck things, lines, whatever. Another method is the travel cost method. And this is a way of calculating how much people spend to go to a particular place. So let's say we're estimating the value of a particular rainforest in Costa Rica. Then you would survey the people there, and you would directly contact each person, but you do not ask them their value. You say, how much did you spend to get here? How many days are you here? What was the flight cost? What were the hotel costs, car, all that kind of stuff. And typically, the more people spend to get to a location and the more often they visit, the greater the value. So we're really calculating a proxy value to determine the value of the resource. And then the last one is relatively new. It's called conjoint analysis, or choice experiments. And this is where you ask people to select a particular good or service, or a choice. They make a choice, and the choice has different elements. And so you're able to single out the different elements that have value. And I have a grad student now who just finished a choice experiment on eggs. And so he was trying to determine what kind of attributes of eggs people are willing to pay for. And I think, like, eggs are eggs, right? No, they're not. You've got the omega eggs, and you've got the free-run eggs, and the organic eggs, and then there's eggs with extra, I don't know,
Size.
different colors, sizes, yeah. So there's tons of different attributes of eggs. And egg marketers want to maximize their value. So they're going to want to target specific consumers and find out what matters and what doesn't matter. So you can determine the value of the attributes. You could do the same with the environment. Okay, any questions so far? So you choose your amenity or service. You figure out what are the characteristics, non-use, use, is it non-market, how you're going to go about estimating its value. So when you decide that, one method can be direct, and all the other methods can, or non-use values can only be direct. All the other types of uses can be any of these, including contingent valuation. So what I want you to do is run through the steps of how you would gather the data, who you would ask, think about the market. Are you talking about something in Saskatoon or all of Saskatchewan or Canada? So those are the types of things I want you to include in the proposal.
So but for this non-use, like wildlife, like Save the Tigers, you could do it indirect by observing what people paid when, I don't know, tigers are 95% gone versus now maybe they're 90. So you can find what they did. You can find the advertising costs, or how much advertising was out there, maybe what, you know, how much is advertising spent on that, and then you'll get a cost, and you'll see what the average person is willing to spend as it gets more and more endangered, for example.
I think you're right. When we have the sort of charismatic megafauna, the big stuff, there are sort of pseudo markets that evolve or that develop because people are actually paying. We know they're paying right now. So why don't we just contact the World Wildlife Fund and the SPCA and the whatever organization is working on those things and figure out how much money that has been spent? Well, obviously, that is the total value. But what do we do? So I think you're right. Maybe some of those things don't fit in that category. They sort of fit in we had quasi-market up here, so that would fit that way, in that category. But what do we do when we have things like, back when I started going to school, what are those little owls that are on the West Coast? People were nailing them to trees. It was really sad. They stopped all the logging. They're little guys. Flammulated owls? I don't remember. The spotted owl, I don't remember. The spotted owl on the west coast of Canada. Most of the logging was shut down in Washington and Oregon, and not so much in BC because it was different laws. But I had a colleague that estimated the value of the spotted owl. And they did it by asking the people in that area. So you're going to ask the loggers, you're going to ask the general public. It's probably going to cancel out. And it might even be negative value of the owls because people are giving a lot up. There's a trade-off. So there's not a fund to save the spotted owl. I think there might be by now. So that kind of thing would fit in existence value. You can see how difficult it would be in determining who are you going to ask, what are their, what do they think about this kind of stuff. That's a good point. Okay. Any other questions? No. Okay, what's it going to do? CBM. Okay, so the contingent valuation is direct. And you'll see in the literature it says equivalent variation. And compensating variation. This has to do with, think compensating as compensation. How much would you be willing to accept? And equivalent variation, what is the equivalent you would pay? So you don't necessarily have to know these, just I've asked you to do a little bit of research for your proposal. So if you're looking at CVM and how it's applied, you'll see equivalent and compensating variation. What you need to do is think about whether you ask willingness to pay and willingness to accept. And I want you to focus on the property rights. Do the people affected in your study have the property rights? And it might not even be specific, like they don't have a right, but they've used something for years and years, and so they feel that they have the right. So are you taking away a good or service from somebody, or are you providing them with something? Okay? So just give it a thought, maybe a couple lines. The method has been around since 1963. And it's undergone tons of criticism. And there's a good reason for it. If you look at the literature on CVM, and specifically for animals and environmental things, how easy is it to do a study? You get some money for a survey, and you go out and you say, what are you willing to pay for this, that, the next thing, right? You ask enough people, you ask you know, a large group, a small group, you're gonna get some number. And if you don't understand the statistics, if you don't understand that there's bias, if you don't understand that there's gonna be a difference between these two numbers, and set up the survey correctly, you're gonna get crap results. And so there's a ton of studies published with crap results.